Welcome back to the Peerless YouTube. I am Caitie North, and today we are going to be doing the first class in our Halloween mini-series. And this one, we will be taking our already gorgeous Peerless journals and making it into an old and ancient and vintage spellbook. So we're gonna be kind of showing how to antique the pages and really focusing on doing kind of the antique sketches and illustrations and kind of designing that way. And then also, once we're done making all of the beautiful artwork in it, how to make it look even older and throw in some splashes and some, rings of water glasses and things that would just, naturally happen when you're working in a spellbook. We're gonna be doing it on ours so it looks very authentic. So I'm very excited about this. I hope you enjoy it, and I cannot wait to see your paintings. So let's get started. So we're just gonna jump in. So usually I would pre-draw this, but I knew it was gonna be a lot of pen work and pencil and then going back with my actual pencil, so I didn't wanna take the time to draw it out first and then transfer it into my journal, but I did make a copy before I painted it. So if you would like this exact drawing and all of the sketches and everything with all the pen marks are done, it is available below. But if you would like to do this on your own or make your own spellbook from whatever, your favorite movie or one that you would use personally, whatever, what I did was sketch it all out in pencil, and then to find some of my images and things that I was going to do my references from, I searched under vintage illustrations. So anything that you would want that's in your little recipe, search under Google, Flickr, what else? Even on Pinterest, whatever it is, like vintage sketch frog or vintage illustration, and then you'll get more of those cross-hatched look and kind of that vintage style. So first I start out in pencil, and I kind of like write my whole thing in there, and I'm not too much worried about my font, because I'm actually very nervous about fonts for a very long time, so I've gotten better at them over the past year, but I usually don't like doing fonts too much. So as long as I get my spacing right and kind of where I want everything to be in pencil, then I'll go back in pen and make the font pretty. And you can see too, like from when I first started, I've changed a few things around. So this is just kind of my general sketching process. And it's kind of fun to watch, but if I were to let you follow along with me the whole time, it would be, I think I was probably sketching for over an hour. So what I do want to show you is once your pencil markers are done, you're gonna go back with your artist pen, and the artist pens are great because they are permanent and waterproof. So once you can do your whole entire sketch and then your watercolor painting on top of it, and those won't smudge or bleed into your watercolors at all. So again, what I was saying with the font, so now I'm making the script a little bit more flowy and pretty and more of a cursive. And then in the next clip, you'll see me kind of highlight the first part of each letter and making them a little bit bolder, and that's what gives it the more stylized font too. So right here you can see how I'm making just some lines thicker and then some lines are still thinner, and that's going to give it that more calligraphy stylized look. If you guys are doing this yourself, this is how I did it. I'm definitely not good at calligraphy, so I did it in 3 stages: pencil, and then I made it more flowy, and then I added the thickness and the lines. So don't be fooled, I did not actually do calligraphy. So, and then yes, you're going to fill up the rest of the page and all of your drawings. And then again, with those cross-hatching vintage kind of sketches, you're just gonna work through all of them and all of your little pieces and add the highlights and not highlights, but the shadows or the cross-hatching in the shadow. And yeah, just kind of giving it that vintage feel. So once your drawing is completely done and you're ready to start painting, I am using the travel palette for this one just because I didn't want to make a palette with like all of the browns on it, but I really wanted to put all of the browns on each page because I wanted it to look super old and I wanted there to be discoloration and I didn't want there to be like one solid color. So I'm using that whole sheet from the travel palette, and I use mostly makeup, but then I put some of the mahogany brown, some of the nectar, some of the sepia brown, warm sepia, pretty much like every brown in this palette once I kind of lay down that makeup first. And I'm trying not to get like the smoothest blend, even though I'm I mean, I'm trying really hard not to because usually I want it to be smooth and, you know, work like this way. But doing wet on wet, you're gonna go through, get a lot of paint in one area and try not to smooth it down because you kind of want those patchy, old kind of feel to it. And then around the edges, I'm gonna make it a little bit darker. So I think the edges get the mahogany brown and nectar, but honestly, whatever brown you want to use. I like this makeup tone as the first one just because it's a little bit more warmer, and then all of my discoloration and other added colors I'm gonna do are either darker or cooler tones. All right, so once you fill up your pages with the makeup, it is now time to start adding some of the darker tones and cool tones, and there's some of the reddish ones. And helpful tip, I put paper towels behind each page because when I actually lifted up my page, I noticed that they were so saturated that my other journal pages were getting wet with paint, so that just kind of keeps it a little barrier. But yeah, this is where I pick up every other paint on this palette and kind of go around the edges, get all of the edges much darker, and then I just kind of, wherever you want to add some of the nectar, just kind of go for it. And still, the pages are still very wet. You can kind of see them like folding up a little bit just because they're so saturated with water and paint right now, but I want there to be like the softness of the blend still too. So once you are done adding as much layers of these paint as you want, you are going to grab your salt, which is, you guys know by now that I've done it in the last like 5 tutorials. It's my favorite. So salt that whole thing. It's gonna give it a beautiful speckled texture in some of the areas. Definitely looks aged and vintage. And then, so since the pages are so wet, they're kind of like billowing out, these little crystals worked perfectly to flatten them as it's drying. So that also helps. At this point, you are going to want to leave it alone. So it is very wet, it's got salt, it's got 3 layers of paint on there. So you're just gonna kind of let it chill on its own. I let mine do paint like overnight, but I'm sure just like a few hours, like an hour would probably be enough. Oh yeah, and then I went around the edge. This is where I put the nectar in, and I think it looks so cool. So as it's still wet, with the paper towel behind it so you don't get it on your other journal pages, I just did the very edges of the book with the nectar, and the red nectar is like such like a rich, like really pretty reddish brown. Oh, it's so good. Oh, I love it. Okay, yes, and let it dry, and then we will come back and start the rest of our painting. All right, so it is all dry. It's lightened up a little bit. There's lots of texture from the salt. And basically now we are going to be using it as a coloring book. So most of our shadowing is coming from this cross-hatching. So we're not even going to be doing a ton of layers in paint. Some things I get a little bit of layers, but really it's just 1 or 2 colors straight from the travel palette. So it's very convenient to have all of those in there. So you're not having to do a ton of, mixing or anything. You're just going, oh, a little bit of the hunter's green in the shadowed areas and the light green and grass green for the lighter areas. Like, it's nothing too crazy. Just think of it as like a really cool coloring book. So going around each illustrations for the bat wing, I use wet on wet, a little bit different between kind of blues and browns mixed together. I think it looks kind of cool to have like kind of that darker shadows, like it's like a blue black but a brown in the shadow. Like, that's kind of what I was going for that one. The frog has brown and kind of golden tones, and I go back again and add a little bit more of a darker green. The lime wedge gets light green and then dark green on the edges, but I like literally, like, it's all of the greens on the paint palette. It will look cool anyway. the light green for the lightest one, and then the outer edges are the dark green. On the margarita itself, I do green on the inside, and I do little very translucent hints of blue for the outlining of the glassware. And yeah, I mean, honestly, it really is. It's just filling it up. You're letting all of the cross hatching and the shadowing of, you know, the pen work do most of the work for you. So that's why I've sped it up. It's nothing crazy. There's not multiple layers on everything. There's like maybe 1 or 2 layers just to kind of like, oh, this part needs to be a little bit darker. The key is one of my favorites. I did which one is it? Chrome yellow, maybe chrome yellow or chrome orange first, and then I let that dry, and then I do a darker orange and a darker brown around the edges, and it looks more kind of like a rusted, not rusted, but like a brass, like a aged darker gold, and I think it's really pretty. So basically all of my first washes are down, and now I want to add some detail and for the shadowed areas, and I'm using my very fine detailed brush. So I make a puddle of green on a little palette, and then I'm able to kind of get sharper lines. And I'm just going through some of the areas. On this one, on the rosemary, I get kind of little lines in them to kind of give them a little bit more of the realistic definition. You know, just small little pieces, all on the lime wheels. So those are basically all of the shadowing and line work, or second layer I did was with that green too. So pretty simple. And then I go back. This is where I go back with the darker brown and the orangey colors for the key. And then, so this next part's probably my favorite. We're going to be making it look aged and weathered and super like realistic, like it was actually used in a family of witches as their grimoire for the last 100 years. So I would imagine that there's spills and stains and all of these different things. So we are going to make a pile of paint, and I use kind of the reddish tones. What did I use? I might have used the poinsettia red and mixed with some other things, but I fill up a little dish, and then I get my, what is it? It's a spice jar, and I dip it. So you know, like those coffee rings that you get on, you know, like when you're at your mom's house, just like, use a coaster. So right now you don't want to use a coaster. You want those coffee rings on these pages because it makes it look so much more authentic. So make a puddle. Dip your spice jar or whatever size rings you want in it, and then you just kind of dab it in the areas where you want it. And two, these water reservoir brushes are great for doing splatters of paint. So you fill up your paintbrush with that, and then you just force it and go flick it, and then you get those splashes and dips too. So along with the little coffee rings and the splatters and dips, I feel like it makes it look so cool and super old and like it's been in your family for hundreds of years. And then after this, we are going to do the white highlights. So with the gel pen, and I wanted to use the gel pen because I didn't want it to be so opaque and white like my ink that I use. This is just a little bit less, and you still get all of the beautiful highlights, but they're not like stark white. So. And then, yeah, this is basically the end of this painting. It looks really cool. It has a really awesome effect. But again, it's not that difficult. And just imagine it as an adult coloring book. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. And I really, really, really wish and hope you guys share with us your paintings. Just make sure to tag Peerless on Instagram or a hashtag. We would love to see your paintings.
Something so I know for certain. Always throw spilled salt over your left shoulder. Keep rosemary by your garden gate. Plant lavender for luck. And fall in love whenever you can.
Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe and share with your friends, and we will see you next time.